Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out. Two ways to do that is email and YouTube. So I have an ad running, both on Paramount Plus, where you can visually see me through that Paramount Plus streaming app. And you hear anything about the Harboring Light, that's me. And also, auditorily and visually, I have, excuse me, a advertisement going on now. And you can hear that through a lot of different platforms, where podcast platforms and so forth. All right, so I'm on a lot of different podcast platforms, so it's not too hard to find me. All right, so the topic of choice here is all about green, and the color how it's associated globally, and the psychology of it in the aesthetic. Let's say that. Because I think aesthetic is a, roundabout way of saying everything in general about this topic here. All right, with all that said, here we go. The color green. My favorite color, by the way. But, throughout history and certain cultures, the color green has different meanings, symbolistic meaning, where it be mystical, where it be, holistic, so forth. Comfort, cozy, you name it. It means something different depending on the culture that you associate green with. And so, also too, is very interesting. So, when I was going to college, I'm very interested in the aspects of marketing and how that works. And if you if you get that right with the aspects of visually showing the product correctly, that carries weight to the whole company and the message in general. So what do I mean by that? So, there's a whole process when it comes to food color theory, or the brand association in general. And so, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. So, believe it or not, there is, or which people, by now, understand that there is a psychology behind the choosing of the certain colors that are associated with brands that are all about food. So, for instance, Subway, Subway, eat fresh. So, fresh is supposed to generate, health in general, in nature, right? So, that's why Subway associates themselves with the color green. But also, they have subliminal colors where you have yellow and things like that, because there's a psychology behind, and there's been testing behind the color yellow and red. They incite some kind of they incite the aspects of hunger, or they incite the aspects of attention, really. When you think about the color red, where you want to stop and look and pay attention. And so these sort of colors, are activating the brain to say, hey, what is this? Let's pay attention to this. Let's, oh, okay. And then, Arby's and so forth and all of that. But now, getting to the color green and the aspects of commercial marketing or commercial advertisement, in general, that's supposed to be centered. The company is saying, without using over-explaining or using a whole bunch of words to convey the message, is that what they're about is nature, something holistic, right? And so, Whole Foods, yeah. You get Nature Valley, and you got with if you're not, associating with food here, you have the certain luxury brand of bamboo. I'm trying to think about that certain brand of bed sheets and so, but you get my point. It's all associated with nature. So with this said, let's get into the aspects of the color green and how it is associated around globally, but also the psychology behind it and all of that. So, of course, I have sources for you, and I'm going to get right into it. All right, so I'm going to start with this here. The history and meaning behind the color green, okay? Okay. All right, so, well, no, I'm going to say that because these are fun facts here. So, sorry about that. So, I'm going to start out with the power of green because this is more detailed in the aspects of what I'm talking about here. And then, I'll wrap up with some fun facts. All right, so the color green is often associated with nature, growth, and renewal. So from the vibrant green of a leafy tree to the soothing green of a grassy field, green is a color that is deeply connected to the natural world. But green is much more than just a color. It is also rich in symbolic meaning and uses of green, and is considered how its versatile color has shaped our perception and experience of the world around us. So they go on to say, if you're an artist or you just appreciate color in general, they have a treat for you. And it's quite interesting how, before I go on here, how they break everything down into the aspects of color and meaning, how we're all connected, even, and how to think about that in those means. So they even go into the aspects of talking about Asian, Indian, African content, right? And how green is symbolically different and means something else to all of these associated continents. But they share the bond with understanding the power within the symbol of green. Okay, so particular aspects of green that will be covered is, symbolism, cultural association, and all that. So there are many possible aspects of green that could be covered in about, but they want to, focus in on, instead of, going in semantics and just drawing it out. They want to focus in on the good stuff here, the meats and potatoes. Okay, so symbolism. Green is often associated with nature, growth, and renewal. It's also sometimes seen as a symbol of hope or good luck. Cultural association. Different cultures may associate different meanings with the color green. So, for instance, in some cultures, green is seen as a symbol of prosperity and fertility, while in others it's associated with death or the supernatural. As I said, you get this a lot. When I was talking about folklore and other podcasts, particularly when I get in talking about the month of October with different supernatural things, because that's apropos to the month of October. But anyhow, when you get into the cultural landscape of green, emerald green being associated with Ireland, and how they use folklore in order to tell the more moral compass of the message in which they want to share their heritage, a lot of times green is really associated, with the symbolism or the visual aspects of the story here. All right, so psychology and emotion. So the color green is often described as a calming and soothing aspect. So, like I was saying back in here, the intro, talking about the psychology of color, red is primarily associated with action. It's an action visual sort of content color, right? And so you stop and pay attention, and then just with the aspects of green, the complementary color on the color wheel. I'm thinking here, if I'm trying to go back, associated with that, if I'm not mistaken, blue is that, and then blue is also associated with the aspects of calm and soothing, right? So it's just very interesting how all these things work here. So green is a common color in art and can be used to create a range of moods. Oh, I'm sorry, let me go back. I skipped over that. So what I was saying about calming and smoothing is also sometimes associated with feelings of jealousy or even envy. When you have that old adage as, oh, he or she is green with envy, that actually means something that is a religious, or you could say a allegory, and to talking about the 7 deadly sins, All right, so artistic use. So green is a common color in art and can be used to create a range of moods and effects. So for instance, dark greens can create a sense of mystery or forbidding something, while light greens can evoke a sense of tranquility or freshness. Now, environmentalism. Green is often associated with environmentalism and sustainability, and may be used as a symbol of support of these causes. Now, fashion and design. Green are very popular in fashion and design and can be used to create a range of looks, from traditional and classic to modern and edgy. So, all right, so let's get on to it. Nature. Green is the color of many plants and trees and often associated with their natural world. And it is a color that is often used to represent the environmental and often associated with themes of growth, renewal, and sustainability. So growth. Green is often seen as a symbol of growth and renewal, and that's why you get green associated with spring, because spring in itself is supposed to be the symbol of renewal. You get out of the harsh winter, you go to spring, revive, plants come back to life, the earth brightens up. So quite naturally, green is going to be a part of that. All right, so it is a color that is often used to present new beginnings and is associated with the idea of moving forward and making progress. So fertility. In many cultures, green is associated with fertility and abundance, and is often seen as a symbol of prosperity and good fortune. It is a color that is often used to present the cycle of life and the passage of the seasons. Good luck. Green is often considered to be a lucky color and is often associated with good fortune and prosperity. In Chinese culture, for instance, it is a color that is often used in traditional celebrations and rituals and is believed to bring good luck and happiness to those who wear it. So, in art, green has been used by artists throughout the history to convey a range of symbolic meaning. In paintings, to represent all those things of tranquility, fertility, and calmness, and balance, and harmony. So, literature, green has often been used as a symbol of nature and growth. So, for instance, in Shakespeare's As You Like It, the character Jacques speaks of the 7 ages of man, in which the final stage is described as second childish of mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. So in this passage, the word sans means without. And the reference to sans everything suggests a state of complete emptiness and lack. So this passage is often interpreted as a commentary on the fleeting nature of life and the importance of embracing each stage of life fully. And there's a lot of depth to that. Alright, so let's go on to in the Western world here. Now, green is often associated with, as I was saying about that sustainability and environmental aspects. So logos that associate themselves with it, you get that, like I was mentioning earlier. You already know what they're about, and without they have to over explain or say a whole bunch of words which mean the same thing. They're simply saying, we're about nature, protecting, or our products is about something that's of the earth that is supposed to, supposedly, good for you here. So in some Eastern cultures, such as China and Japan, green is associated with immortality and is often used in traditional art and literature to represent spiritual growth and enlightenment. When you get, for instance, the jade is associated with that spirituality and immortality too. And that's why you see in folklore, Chinese folklore, gods, goddesses are, supernatural. They have themselves associated with the jade symbol here, to add on to that. So in Islamic culture, green is a sacred color and is often associated with the Prophet Muhammad. So it is a symbol of paradise and is used extensively in Islamic art and architecture. You can see that a lot when you go into the intricate details of the Islamic Persian culture and the art. And then when you get into the temples and so forth, you can see a lot of shades of green associated with those things. Alright, so in Hinduism, green is associated with the goddess of fertility, prosperity, and good fortune. So, like Sumi is also associated with the god of death and rebirth, as rebirth with Shiva. So overall, the perception and use of green varies widely across different cultures. So in general, it is seen as a positive and hopeful color that is associated with it. So Western cultures is often seen as calming and refreshing color, and that's why you see it in spas and sometimes in hospitals here. And then also, when the aspects in association with St. Patrick's Day. So in many cultures, green is also associated with, as I say, I'm not going to just keep saying that over again. All right, so let's go on to Ireland. So in Ireland, for example, green is an important color for traditional dress. Men often wear green vests, jackets as part of their traditional attire. So women will often wear green dresses, blouses, and scarves too. So the color green is also featured primarily in the country's flag and the coat of arms. All right, so, and to add on with, they say with Islamic art and all of that, in the calligraphy and the title work, you see green, and then clergymen are associated, and then they go on the aspects of Iran and the symbol of resistance and courage. But hey, you know what? There's also a nuance to that. With this resistance and courage, that can be radicalized, and that's another thing to, reconsider yourself when you see the aspects of green and then it being associated with Iran. All right, so in many African cultures, green is associated with the nature and are often used traditionally in clothing and textiles. So in the Ashanti tribe of Ghana, for instance, green in the kente cloth is an important symbol of the Ashanti kingdom. So in China, green is associated with growth, health, and harmony, and is frequently used in traditional art, architecture, and painting. So Chinese traditional weddings often feature the color green, which is thought to bring good luck and prosperity to the couple. All right, so another thing about in India, and it says that it represents life. Green represents life, youth, and good luck. So, and the Kubra, the god of wealth, which is Kubra, is associated with growth and rebirth. And the Krishna is often depicted with a dark blue or black skin. It's depicted with dark blue or black skin. And Krishna is also associated with a green complexion, signifying the union between divine nature. Similarly, in Buddhism, the both the Shiva of compassion is often depicted in green. So, in Native American tribes, green is associated with the natural world and is often used in color and clothing, jewelry, and pottery. All right, so the psychology of green. All right, green is often associated with nature and it evokes feelings of calmness and balance and harmony. And so studies have shown that the color green, to add on to that, can have a positive effect on the human brain. So how? So it says, for instance, viewing green spaces have been shown to reduce stress and improve mood. So the color green has also been shown to improve reading speeds and accuracy and improve test performance in school children. In addition, it is a psychological effect that is weighing on green and is associated to have psychological, aspects to that. So what does all that mean, what I just said? So for instance, viewing green spaces have been shown to lower blood pressure and heart rate and to improve overall cardiovascular health, because you get the power of green. Green, for the most part, is associating itself with positive moods and feelings. So that makes a lot of sense. And there is something to the psychology of the mental state of the power of belief of that. So what do I mean by that? So especially, this is just very straightforward. So let's say someone knows that, they get the news that they're going to die because of a cancer or something that is an illness that is really stricken and on their body, that is just devastating the body. And so there's a lot of power to the psychology of hope and free will. So if you believe that, so I hear this devastating news, but it's going to be okay. I'm sure there's other medicine that can help me, or if not, these are the alternatives or something, just to constantly be in perpetual hope. Versus someone, that takes it harshly and they just accept, and there has been cases where, people just die. And there's something to that. All right, so the color green is also associated to have a positive effect on the eyes. So green is a relatively easy color for the human eye to process. And it is often used as a background color for text because it is easy on the eyes. In addition, because green is a color that is often associated in nature, it can help to reduce eye strain and fatigue. All right, so it is worth nothing that people's perception of color can vary deeply on personal experience, in cultural background and context. So therefore, it is not always a universal meaning or effect that has a certain color has on an individual. It's always important to consider these factors when using color in design or marketing. Yes, because you need to understand that sometimes green is not favorable for a person because that it might have an offset memory of something that is associated with a bad connotation, or you just don't know, so you have to be very mindful. All right, so in branding and advertising, reliability is also another thing that is associated with green. So let's wrap up by saying this. It's also important to note that green is also a color of balance and harmony, and is often used as a complementary color in many designs to give an overall harmony of looks. And companies understand this right too, with the using harmony or having their company associated with green, because green is supposed to generally it evokes the emotion or the understanding of trust. So Fidelity, right? For instance, Fidelity is an investment company, and then most of it is it's very investment, but most of it, which my association with Fidelity, back when I was working 9 to 5 here, it is 401k, right? And so there's a reason behind the color association that is used with Fidelity. Green is very prominent in it, and then you see this with the aspects of certain financial companies. They use green to get your foot in the door and to understand, okay, and see if that works. Okay, so this company, they're all about trust, so let me try this out. And there's something about that, the psychology of associating color with certain things. All right, so moving on here. All right, so I'm going to wrap up here with this. All right, so did you know that green is related to the Old English word green, the term of color of living plants? So historians think that Napoleon Bonaparte actually died because of Shelley's green, which this was a toxic pigment that was in his green bedroom and with his wallpaper that was colored for his wallpaper. Something. Green evokes, as I was saying, about the aspects of serenity, and architects and designers know this. Did you know that in the Elizabethan era, green was a common color for wedding gowns for brides in the lower and middle classes? All right, so the history of the color green. So green has been used in art since the time of ancient Egyptians. So they use green, earth, and the aspects of that, while the ancient Greeks used the verdigris. So green had a resurgence in art during the Impressionist movement due to the advancements in green pigment and paints, and that you get with the aspects of watercolors, because the Impressionist watercolors, that was their favorite best friend. You can do a lot with oil painting, the aspects of oil and oil paints. But it's something about what the Impressionists were trying to do. They wanted to do something fast and quick. They didn't want to have something that was very ornate and took a lot of time and detail, because they wanted you to understand that, their ideology about the world around them, and their art was about enjoying the present. And so nature is very vocal when you want to get the subject matter about being present, because nature in itself reinforces you to understand that. And so it makes a whole lot of sense for them to have the the color palette filled with a lot of greens here. All right, so green had a resurgence, and so the bold emerald green became popular in fashion also in the late 1800s. All right, so let me go on. And then going on with the aspect of nature, there's a reason behind the term green thumb, because that is associated with nature. So, and then if you're interested, they also give you how the aspects of green dye is made. So I'm going to wrap up by saying this. And then if you want to read more, feel free to do so. And feel free to get associated or learn more about the Hunter Lab, which this is the source that I'm reading from. I'm just paying them for it here. I'm not getting paid by them. I'm just paying them for it. So compared to other colors, green pigments are of creating dye and have been challenging to identify. So the ancient Egyptians used forgive me for the pronunciation. I'll do my best to say this. Malachite, which was costly and turned black. So Chilis green, which was invented in 1775, and Paris green from the end of the 19th century were both hues of green made with toxic chemicals. Those exposed to these pigments could become quite ill or often, unfortunately, die. So today there are many ways to create green dye using natural sources, as the following. We, get matcha. Matcha's everywhere. Foxglove, Queen Anne's lace, mint, black-eyed Susan, artichoke, grass, and lily of the valley. All right, so, and then I'm going to say this from a scientific point of view to add on to this, because I know it's unfortunate with the aspects of how people are viewing science now, that, science is really, you can ignore the natural world, but you cannot. But science in itself, when you look at it and you respect it, it really is the shining light, for our foundation of humanity here. All right, so let's see what they say about measuring the color green. So the perception of green occurs with light at wavelengths between 520 and 570 nanometers. So a spectrophotometer is a tool that takes measurements of color samples like green by breaking the light beam into its wavelength components. So this information can be used to determine the quality of the color and make the process of improvements if necessary. Alright, so this reaches the end of the Harbor Light, and I would greatly like to know what you all think. Feel free to reach out to me. 2 ways to do that is through email and YouTube. Alright, so tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care out there. Bye-bye for now.